Hotep. I'm Dr. Gloria Lattimore Peace, host and producer of OmniU Presents the H3O Art of Life show. The title of this show is In Sickness or in Health. And certainly the question is raised as an either or because it's virtually impossible to be both in sickness and in health. And I have with me my very dear colleague, Olumenji O'Connor, who is an educator, a researcher, an activist, an organizer, and a number of other things to discuss this topic with me this afternoon. And I'd like to greet you.
And thank you. I'm very pleased and proud to be here.
Well, I'm very pleased and proud to have you here. Our conversation started some time ago, and I was recently observing that while we have food deserts in our community, we also have healthcare deserts in our community. And by that I mean it is very difficult to find healthcare when you really need it, even if you have medical coverage. If you have a doctor, when you're ill, you can't just call in and say, I need to come and see you, because you have to make an appointment. And by the time you get your appointment, whatever it was has either gotten worse or healed itself on its own. So it's very difficult unless you want to go to emergency rooms, urgent care, these clinics that are in drugstores and other places, and pay a lot of extra money. It's very difficult to be taken care of when you have a need for health care. And so it is very important that we maintain good health, because there's no certainty that whatever kind of support you have for accessing a healthcare system, that it's going to work at the time it's needed most. So I know that there's a lot for us to cover, and I want you to begin wherever you want to, and we'll go from there.
Well, let's deal with the question that you raised. There are two fundamental things that we really have to understand about health. We really don't have a healthcare system in America.
Oh.
In my view, what we have is an industrial complex which calls itself a healthcare system. And by that I mean that the intent is more on the economic aspects of this system rather than the well-being of the people in the system, just for the reasons that you explained. Everything costs in this society. And if you don't have money, then money limits your accessibility to this system. And then the other thing is being able to navigate the system. This is a very complicated system that requires expertise just to be able to navigate it for whatever the reasons are. This is why I think that what we have to do is we have to seize control of our health ourselves. Can't depend on anybody else. That means we have to educate ourselves. We have to be responsible for our own health, because if we're not, then we have to be knowledgeable, because if we're not, then we're dependent, and we're dependent on a system that is really hostile to us. There was a recent study that was done that showed, I can't think of the organization that did it, but they were dealing with deaths in hospitals. Well, 3 of those hospitals were in the black community, meaning that if you went in those hospitals for certain things, they had more deaths than other hospitals. Now, we got to raise the question about that. Was it because of physicians? Was it because of care? Was it because that we were so far gone? Because a lot of times we get diagnosed with something that if we had known on the front end, we could have put a squash on it. We could have done a very productive intervention. And as opposed to waiting now where the only thing they can do for you is something radical. So let's talk about what's radical. The American healthcare system basically will do three things. They will drug you, they will cut you, we call that surgery, and then they will burn you, we call that radiation, okay? I mean, this is the pool. Now, I'm not saying they're not other, but for major things, these are the three things that they do. They do not deal with a holistic, comprehensive piece, and that's because of their worldview. When we talk about health, health comes out of your worldview. This industrial complex is technologically driven, okay, by the latest gizmos, the latest machines, the latest computers, the latest dials, the latest glitz and gits, and that's what drives this system, as opposed to preventive measures, preventive notions, and really working those things, and so much so that it's an alienating system. Many black people don't really trust going into hospitals, and so they do everything they can to stay out of the hospital, which is on one level is counterproductive because you may need to go in the hospital. But because of the complexities, because of attitudes with many professionals, not all, but too many, in terms of the mythologies that, well, you know, black people can stand pain. Well, you know, ask black people if they can stand pain, and I'm sure they would tell you, like anybody else, they don't want to, but that comes from slavery. So there's a lot of mythologies that are within the health industry that impacts health workers, particularly those who are not African American, because they don't really know us. And we have to understand that medicine is not necessarily health. Medicine is a part of health. When we talk about a health system, we're talking about something that deals with well-being in a comprehensive way. If we were to look at our history, and I bought this piece with Herodotus, who was the European who is supposed to be the father of history, the father of their history, Greek and their world history. And what he writes in book 2, I just want to read you this one little part here. He says that the Egyptians who have lived and cultivated parts of the country by their practices of keeping records of the past have made themselves the most learned of any nation of which I have experience. So these were learned people. Well, of course they were, because they had lived for what, thousands of years, and they had been impacted with no model. So they had to create their own model. He says, I will describe some of their habits. Every month for 3 successive days, they purged themselves for their health's sakes with emenics, which is just a way of regurgitating, in the belief that all disease comes from the food a man eats. And it is a fact, even apart from this precaution, that next to the Libyans, they are the most healthiest people in the world. And the Libyans at that time are black people, okay, up in North Africa. And so after the Libyans, per Herodotus, the people of Kemet are the healthiest people in the world. Well, when you look at the top killers in the black community, we're only 13, 14, maybe 15% of the population, depending on who you talk to. Census says 13, but they don't get everybody. So 13, 14%, we're like 23, 24%, right next to whites. That should not be. That's suspect.
That is under the top 3 killers: heart disease, cancer.
That's right.
And
heart disease, cancer, strokes. I just had it on there.
That's all right. We'll come back to it.
Right. Diabetes, homicides. Let me see. Let's see.
Well, homicides is probably our number 1 health issue,
for
although
young men.
It's not regarded as a health issue.
Yeah,
Mental health is involved
yeah.
in homicide.
Well, what I would say is that it is the community value that tolerates that, and yes, mental health is that. For me, mental health is a part of health. You can't say, if you have mental health problems, you're not going to have good health. You see, I think at this time we probably need to get into what do we mean when we say health.
Right.
And from my perspective, we are born and designed as integrated beings, meaning there is no dichotomy between your muscles and your circulatory. It is all integrated. It is all tied into one piece. Now, in Western science, they do this dichotomy thing. In the African worlds, they didn't do that. They understood the comprehensive being, and they tried to deal with mind, or rather spirit, mind, body. Okay? And it's where you come from relative to your cultural worldview. And for the African people, they always thought of spirit first. Okay? And then from the spirit, the mind or the heart, and then the body. And that all these things manifest themselves in a form which you call your physical body. Now, and that's true because when we look at Western science, they go with the idea of psychosomatic. Well, we know that psycho comes out the word psyche, which initially meant spirit or soul in Greek mythology. Then it evolved into mind. And so when we look at soma, it means the physical. So that means that the root of this piece, whatever the disease is, starts with the mind or the spirit and then manifests itself in the body. Now, today they call it mind-body, but it's been called a wide variety of names, and it's simply in its most simple, basic principle. It is that somewhere in either your spirit or your mind, there's something there that is producing disease or dis-ease, okay, within your body, and so it manifests. So let's look at the idea of if you're angry and it's constant, eventually we can predict you're going to have high blood pressure. It's only a question of time. And we can predict that if you're adding salt and you're having a lot of pressure, eventually you may have a heart attack, you may have a stroke, okay, because there's something there that is just not, it's out of whack, it's not in balance. And when I think of health, I think of the notion of ma'at, the harmony, the balance, and good order. To me, that's health, that your body's orderly, you have it's harmonious relationship between all of the components within your body related to the whole, and that it's in good order, and that it's balanced, that everything is balancing itself out. Now, a guy by the name of Hans Soye, I believe, he did a piece where he talks about homeostasis, okay? The idea of organic stability. Okay, I can relate to that, okay? But for me, it's ma'at because it's a little bit deeper than just the physical organic stability. It is the total being in good order. But you cannot have health just as an individual. You have health with family, you have health with community, you have health in the environment, you have, health is comprehensive. It feeds into all of the aspects of existence because health really deals with life.
Because that ties right into African culture.
Yes.
You can't be an individual. You have no
That's right.
existence.
That's right.
As an individual. That was considered an evil word, in
Yes.
fact.
Yes.
Because I am because you are.
That's right.
You are because I am.
That's right. The whole notion
who
of
are you?
Ubuntu.
Who are you? That have you brought yourself into being?
That's right.
That's
right.
When they talk about death in the family, they don't mean that an individual in the family dies. When death is in the family, it's indeed in the family.
That's right.
Even though probably in most cases, only one of the members of the family has made a transition. The entire family is affected by this.
That's absolutely
because
correct.
you do not live in isolation.
That's right.
Even if you want to think so, even if you want to be a Westerner and consider yourself an individual, you are not an individual, and you cannot be healthy in an unhealthy environment, whether it's familial or just the environment that is comprised of where you live, what, you know, the land, the water, the air. That is not your total environment. And I wanted to speak to this notion of being angry leading to high blood pressure. Being stressed is also a factor in dis-ease, because you cannot constantly be upset by something. Even very often we like to be like to pretend like it never laid a glove on us. There's nothing wrong, you know, this happened, you know, my relationship was terminated abruptly without my realizing that that was a possibility. But you know, I put that behind me.
I'm cool.
I'm cool. We try to always be cool. Well, the fact of the matter is we are not cool, because we have to pay attention to the fact that the things that happen, we are aware, even if we don't want to be, of things that are going on that we feel are unjust, that we feel are unwarranted, that we feel are threatening. All of that creates stress.
Yes, I don't disagree with the concept, but I would probably use a different word. And I've been in circles where and people have kind of thought about it. Let's work with the idea of stress. For me, stress is an everyday action, routine. I mean, we can get up in the morning and we got aches and pains and we're stressed out, okay, or we kick something. The black community is under duress and distress.
I agree.
Distress.
I will buy that all day.
Distress is pathogenic because it facilitates disease-forming agents within our bodies. When we say distress and duress, we simply mean that we're under a pressure cooker continuously.
Right.
Continuously.
Right.
With one of the words for duress is forcible restraint. It's like
you're trapped.
Right. And so one of the words that one of the things we could do is draw the proverb that the ancestors, our forebears from down south used to talk about, say, well, you know, I'm in between a rock and a hard place.
Right.
Meaning wherever I go, I'm trapped.
Right.
So that's representative of that duress and distress. And so that's not healthy. And if you keep having that, then you're stimulating forces that are really positive, because we are wired for life. We're not wired just to survive. We're wired first to survive, and then after that to be at an optimum level. Okay, and so there are forces, chemical, biological, electronic forces, forces of consciousness, because our whole bodies are conscious.
Every cell is conscious.
That's right. Every cell is knows what's happening. If I was to kick this, it would say, "Look, I hurt." Send it up to the brain. Say, "You just kicked the chair. Watch yourself." Okay, and then my brain would take, or my mind would take corrective actions. So be less pain, perhaps. Endorphins would kick in, so I'd have less pain, so to become manageable. Okay, but we're under duress and distress on a continuous, ongoing. Because if you looked at many of those ailments that were in the top piece, many of those are psychosomatic. Many of those are a result of us continuously reacting, because of what? Because of the system that we're in. So if when we look at this system, we could call that system white supremacy, or white hegemony, or white domination, or just a system that is controlled that we have no control over. And by not having any control over it, then we're
subject to the whims.
That's right. That's right. That's right. We're subject to the whims of the system. I want to lay out something here that we can consider here. Health is more than health care. Okay, so it's not just medicine. Health is lifestyle, it's relationships. And you know, in the African world, it's all about relationships. A relationship with yourself, relationship with the universe, the ancestors, your family, everybody. It's about
invisible.
relationship. That's right. And so when that's damaged, you're going to get sick. And so people would do things about that. Health is a resource. So therefore, when we look at the health system in this country or the industrial complex, it has a political economy, meaning that there are people who make the determination who's going to get what, where, when, how, and if. And then, of course, economy means that there are people who are managing, limiting resources, limiting access, determining costs, okay? Because there's some things, for example, in this country, you might have done to yourself, where you go in other countries where they have what they call medical tourism, and it's very, 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 very reasonable, if not cheap, but high quality, because many of the physicians in those countries have gone to Western modern universities, see. And so we have to be clear that it's a resource, and that's why the political on our end is to always watch the policies. Always, if it's something we don't like, make ourselves felt, because at the end of the day, since we depend on the public sector, because we don't necessarily have private sector resources. Now, I think one of the things that Obama did that I respect and I appreciate was the Health Care, Affordable Care Act, because what it does, it makes health care a right. Something, and in real world, it is a right. I mean, how can you determine whether a person lives or dies? So I think that white supremacy adds to the life burden that we have as a people. It's as simple and as basic as unemployment. Let me give you an example. There was a European by the name of Harvey Bremer, and this was a long, long time ago in the 70s, I think. He wrote this long study. I mean, this was a longitudinal study. I mean, and what did he find out? He came up with this one notion. He said that for every drop in the economy, meaning unemployment goes up, automatically what's going to increase is homicides, crime, suicides, substance abuse, etc. Well, if what Mr. Bremer said is true, and you're looking at black communities that have unemployment 33%, 40%, I mean, and no telling what it is for young people. Some people have told me 40, some people have told me 50%. I mean, imagine that. So what we know now is that unemployment in our communities now is structural, meaning that no matter what the economic cycle is, there's going to be a segment of young people who are never going to know what it is to work in terms of having a job or getting up every day and dealing with. Now, if we understand the long-term implications of that, that's very, 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 very dangerous, not only for the community, but for the country, okay, to have that. White supremacy just makes life even harder and more confusing. Here's a good one: demand and low control. The system demands, and you don't have any control. So you just react, which means you're activating these defense forces that are in you, okay? How long can you keep doing that?
Without wearing them out.
That's right. And not only wearing them out, but having what is a plus now turn into a minus for you, okay? And then the other piece is that this whole notion of duress and distress is a pressure cooker. It is a restraining piece. And people use pressure cookers because it's a quick cook. But just imagine the food that's in there being cooked. It has nowhere to go. It's locked into a pot, and then the heat is turned on, turned on. So it's that pressure.
And the pressure is never let up.
That's right. So consider this. You just bought a house, just bought a car, because you just got a job. Or you've had a job for however you want to play the job piece. And then all of a sudden, you are told, plant is moving. And they're laying off people here because they're going to move it overseas. So that's somebody else's policy. And we know the notion, last hired, first fired. That's policy. So now, you just bought this house. You just bought this home. And we know that in the labor force, once you drop out, it may take anywhere from 2 to 3 years, or a year to 2 to 3 years for you to get back into something, and it will not be on the same level as it once was, okay, with less money, because that's how the system is set up these days. And so the point is, and then you go home, someone's broke into your house, okay, they stole things, the insurance company doesn't cover it. So these are stressors, okay? Now,
Distressors.
That's
I'm
right.
staying with you.
That's right. Distressors, but these distressors now do what? They could act as agents to facilitate disease depending on what your state of health is, okay, how you deal with it. Some agents have greater impact than other agents. So imagine if you're traveling, you're a refugee leaving a country with children, and you don't know what you're going to do, you don't know where you're going, different weather, different food. I mean, all these things require us to adapt and adjust. But in that adaptation, it may not be sufficient to keep you well. And that doesn't even deal with the psychological aspects of it, where you're just feeling depressed and down because, and we know that if you're depressed and down as a consistency, you shut down your immune system. Because somebody come and sneeze, you might catch that cold. And we know people who really have depressions, they really don't take care of themselves, okay? And so that makes them more susceptible to disease or sickness that then evolves into disease. So I want to make a distinction here. When I say sickness, that's the short term. When I say disease, I'm talking about something that's just chronic, okay? So these are some things that I going back to what you said, I wanted to make sure that we really covered. And that is, again, that health is more than a medical industrial complex. It's more than so-called healthcare, okay? That health is a resource, and therein is a political economy. That means that somebody is controlling it, and somebody is managing a scarce resource, okay? And that white supremacy adds to additional burden on our lives as black people.
I want to piggyback on much of what you've said. One of the things I want to observe is it is good for us to travel. And
Absolutely.
especially it is good for us to travel
Absolutely.
to Africa so that
Absolutely.
we can, and not as tourists,
Absolutely.
but to live with Africans as
Absolutely.
Africans live. One of the things that you would see is that, at least in this one example that I personally observed, I was in Senegal, and there was a strike among the medical workers because doctors are salaried, and there was a strike around issues of wages. And when the doctors went on strike, others in different professions and trades also went on strike. The result was that there was a blackout in the city.
They shut the, right.
And consequently, every evening, There were no lights except you could see the places that had generators. You could see lights, like the big hotels had lights. But you could walk down, as we did, you could walk down the street, say on your way to eat, and you know that you'd see candles in the restaurants or candles on the table and what have you. The interesting thing was that crime did not increase, which was amazing, because if you consider the fact that they had an unemployment rate of something like 70%, which is just unheard of. Most people were doing things like street selling. You know, they were vendors on the street, and they would follow you around and sell you something every time you came out. But the point is that had that happened, that's Senegal, Dakar. If that had happened in any city in the United States, there would have been widespread looting, burglaries, robberies, homicides, murders, and everything else. But every morning when the sun came up again, you did not see plate glass windows in the street. You did not see anything that looked any different from the day before. And that is because they have a different set of values.
Yes.
And they don't violate each other because there's an opportunity to violate. And they look to taking care of themselves, to making a living rather than getting a job. And so there's a whole different mindset.
That's right. That's
an
right.
attitude toward materiality and all of that. So that's one thing I wanted to observe. And the other thing is Hunter Adams is working on a book which I hope that he will finish, and he's dealing with this concept of slaves. And it's a misnomer, because what we have been and what we still are is captive, not enslaved but captive, which means when you take someone a captive, you are their captor. You then deny them the freedom to self-determination, to determine their own destiny, to make choices about how they're going to live, what they're going to do, where they're going to live, and all of these kinds of things. So to talk about emancipation in that view, that, you know, Lincoln emancipated the slaves, when someone has been taken captive, if they do not free themselves, they remain captive. And consequently, there is always this rock and hard place, because you know without being told your limits. You know how far on this leash you can go before it will snap your neck. And so the distress that our people experience comes from knowing that if you lose this job, there is nothing that you can do to keep anything that you own or you are paying on, because you know we don't really own things, we pay toward them. But the thing is to live that and to know that subliminally, because we try to pretend like we don't know that. We try to pretend that we don't know that we are dependent entirely on things which we do not control, which you have mentioned more than one time. When you do not control the very substance that is required in a money economy in order for you to survive, let alone thrive and develop, then that there is duress going on there all the time. Some days look better than others. Some careers and professions look more promising than others, but it takes nothing more than identity theft, the loss of employment, or any other reversal, and you are one of those people under Wacker Drive. You know, how do we understand how people become homeless? They don't become homeless because they decide they want to quit their jobs and not pay rent or not pay their house note and not pay for the things that they are obligated
Anybody
to.
could be homeless.
That's right.
I mean, it's just, do you have the economics to maintain housing?
Right.
Okay. But I want to hit on that point that you talked about in Senegal. I don't necessarily think that just because, and I don't like the word poverty, but just because you're in poverty, that you're necessarily criminal. Because in the old black communities, we were poor. We weren't poor.
Right.
We were poor. We just P-O, not the O-R.
Right.
And there was a certain understanding that you don't, that there were two things people would tell you quickly. I don't like liars, I don't like thieves.
Right.
Because this was a thing that we all poor. So why would you steal and take from me?
Right. And if you lie, you will steal.
That's right. That's another thing that they would say too. If you lie, you steal. Now, what's the important point here in comparisons to Senegal is that they had communities. Our communities are becoming less and less and less. The community standard that our parents grew up under, that we grew up under, that we work for our kids, that's becoming less, because those communities were strict, but not absolutely strict, but they were strict. There were just certain things that you knew if you did and it got back to your people, then you would be in a world of trouble. Because they just, or you never wanted to tag where a parent would tell their children, don't play with him, or no, he can't come over to the house, or no, she can't, because that was an overall community. When you have communities, communities can make life easier. Some of the other things that relative to Africa that we did that we're kind of getting away from, and that's the idea of courtesies and manners, because it makes things softer, because it minimizes conflict, because I know how to deal with you. I know if I don't deal with you this way, then I've just dished you.
And I respect you.
And I respect you. And it makes life easier. When you lose that, it's as basic as when when the flu season is here, and people will sneeze in their hands and they want to shake your hands. And it's like, bruh. Or people sneeze out into the air because they don't know the proper way. Turn your head, tuck your head into your arm, and sneeze. Why? Because once you put it out in the air, we all then enjoy the benefit of your germs.
Secondhand germs.
And we do not want your germs because these viruses now are getting tighter and tighter and tighter, and they have to wear off.
Look at this, Olumenji. People often go to work ill because they can't afford to be off.
But that's all part of the system. And you know, in some of the old songs, they talked about, well, you know, I got to go to work because if I don't, then even though I'm sick, you know, so I'm going to work to the grave. I mean, this was the lament in much of our music. But I'm saying we had community. And I think that when you have community, it makes life easier and healthier. We had people in the neighborhood who had many, 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 many different skills, okay? Miss Jones, who might have delivered babies down south, so she might deliver your baby. Miss so-and-so, she knew how to cook.
And Miss so-and-so was the candy lady.
There you go. I mean, everybody had they hustle, and people just knew you couldn't depend. Well, we've kind of gotten out of that because now everybody wants a job. I maintain and I predict that we will go back to something that's similar to that, and it's already happening in various places where people are just hustle. And when I say hustle, I don't mean that it's necessarily illegal, because there's a lot of hustles that people do that are quite legal, or at a minimum they're in a gray area. So I'm saying this concept of health, of community, because community minimizes alienation and isolation. These are, in my view, these are things that if you're continuously isolated and you're continuously alienated, that means then you have no social support. Right. And in the literature, it talks about social support, particularly if you have chronic or catastrophic illness, cancer, or something really major. You need that social support, which is an African notion. In the Akan tradition, I can't think of the name of the person now, but this is a person that's designated by the family to go with you everywhere when you're sick, to go with you in the doctor's office or the healer's office, to go with you to get medicine, to go with you to the, I mean, this is the person that tends and looks at, and that person may not be a mother or a grandmother or an auntie, but it might be a sister, it might be a cousin, it might be a niece, but all these are people, and we know that if you go into this mass system, then you need somebody who goes to the hospital with you to say, whoa, wait a minute, what are you saying? Explain that. Because a lot of times, medical professionals, by training, will throw
the patient.
Throw this jargon at you, and you don't understand what they're saying, and people don't want to appear dumb. But here's the point. If you don't know, you've got to ask, because if you agree to something and you don't understand the implications of that, right, then that's you. It's going to be on you. So having people there who can raise the issue intelligently and keep raising the questions until you're satisfied with the answer that's being given to you. Because at the end of the day, even though you're a doctor's patient, it ain't the doctor's life. Excuse me. It's not the doctor's life. It's your life. And we have to assert ourselves when we're dealing with this, and we need to have people who, especially smart young people who know how to handle business, or just a sister or a brother who can say, wait a minute, what are you saying, Doc? What's that? Can raise questions and make them break it down, as opposed to saying, well, you need surgery. No. Why do I need surgery? What's going to be the outcome of the surgery? What's going to be the side effects of the surgery?
Drug.
What's going to be, I mean, you need to raise those questions, because many times you hear black folks say, well, that drug, it doesn't make me feel well. Well, call your physician, and maybe the physician needs to take you off that medication, give you a lower dosage, but the physician knows what the side effects are. I mean, they have a book called PDR, Physician's Drug, I can't think of the last name, big, thick book, probably in libraries. You should go there and read and see what the side effects are.
Well, any drug that you're given comes with an insert.
Absolutely.
That gives you the side effects.
Absolutely.
If you read that insert, you won't take the drug.
Absolutely.
But let us talk now about what we need to do. First of all, if a community suffers as a community, regardless of whether or not you consider yourself an individual or not, from illness or other adverse conditions, then the community can benefit from health. So a community needs to make a vow to itself, or at least set the goal of becoming healthy, or becoming at least health conscious, at least know what it is that you ought to do and what it is you ought to avoid. One of the things that we forget is that there are a lot of things that we can do for ourselves to prevent ourselves from becoming ill. Among them are having a healthy diet, which has to do with a lot of fruit and vegetables and clean water. It doesn't take a lot of money to buy fruit and vegetables. It costs a lot of money to buy meat. Fruits and vegetables are relatively inexpensive. If you buy organic fruits and vegetables, then you kick it up a notch. But the point is that if we think more about what kind of vegetable is going to be on the plate before we try to figure out what kind of meat is going there, then we make vegetables and fruits the centerpiece of the diet. We need to eat more healthily. We need to feed not just ourselves, bragging about I'm a vegetarian but you need to use your influence and whatever you can to seduce other people in your family, because when they become ill, if they are your husband, your brother, your mother, your father, your child, it is going to cause distress.
Right.
So let us try to stay well. Let us try to stay out of nursing homes. Let us try to stay out of hospitals. Let us try to stay out of doctors' offices. Let us do all that we can. And if we are not able to do some things, then let us remember, you know, simple things like garlic is a natural antibiotic.
Yes.
Why do we not already have it in the meals that we're making, so that we don't have to figure out, oh, I got to go start getting some garlic? There are simple things that we can do. We can go on the internet. They got MDs on the internet.
Absolutely.
You are a researcher, so I know.
I would recommend Mayo, and I would recommend Johns Hopkins University websites.
Mayo website,
Right.
Johns Hopkins.
Mayo right up in Minnesota.
And there are doctors, MD or something website?
The federal government runs on researchers. I mean, the information is out there. There are books that are out there on the internet, and most of us have smartphones now. You can go right through there. And then I would recommend going to CDC for people who are really the Center for Disease Control. Okay, because they have layouts of what's happening to us statistically. They have different things on nutrients. Okay, let's be clear about why we eat. We don't eat for the purposes of the taste of the food. That's what the advertisers say. We eat the basic American diet, which is SSF, sugar, salt, and fat. So if you eat that over multiple generations, okay, without physical exercise or another type of lifestyle, then you're setting yourself up for to be ill. And then as we look at our families that over multiple generations now, maybe 2-3 generations, we see diabetes, we see heart, we see cancer. These things, maybe with the exception of diabetes, they weren't for us. They belong to other people, especially cancer. But now these things are becoming more and more prevalent in our communities with our people. Diet is a very important piece, but we have to go back to learning how to cook food again. See, this generation of fast food and McDonald's and what's that boy, the Colonel, and I mean, all this grease and stuff. I mean, our people used to know how to cook. They used to know about pot liquor.
And we used to like to cook and take pride in cooking.
That's right. That's right. The old grandmothers had herbs that they grew in the backyard, or the mints, and they put that, they put them in food.
Well, they didn't have to use so much salt because they had spices.
That's right.
You overdo it with salt because you're
right.
trying to give some kind of taste to the food.
That's right. The peppers, the red peppers, the red pepper, and then peppers, all of that kind of stuff. And depending on where you came from, you either had a bigger dose or a smaller dose, but you did have it in the food.
And exercise is an important piece, because even though our people very often ate too much of salt, sugar, and fat,
but they worked.
They were working.
That's right.
They were not couch
That's right.
potatoes.
That's
You
right.
cannot sit there
That's right.
and consume all
That's
of these things
That's right.
and expect not to see some
That's right.
side effects
That's right.
from a bad diet.
That's right. That's right. I mean, the lifestyle was vigorous, and so they needed the energy and vitality that came from food.
I want to mention too toxicity, because one of the things that I learned and probably could have known a lot sooner is that if you open up the cabinet under your sink or wherever you keep your cleaning products, you will see all kinds of warnings on these products that you're buying in stores.
Mm-hmm.
These things not only are not healthy, some of these detergents are not healthy.
Mm-hmm.
You're washing your clothes, your bed linens, and so forth. You're inhaling that. Then some of these things you're using to scour your sink, to wash your dishes. You need to afford yourself cleaning products that do not have warnings, even if you have to resort to white vinegar
Yes.
and soda
That's right.
for cleaning agents. There are ways to clean, and Google that.
Yes.
Google healthy alternatives to all of these things that you pay all this money for, that you think are keeping you clean. Bleach, chlorine bleach. Bleach has its place, but not in your lungs.
That's right.
You don't need to be inhaling.
That's right.
These so one of the first lines of defense is to find another way to clean everything you clean, so that you can put the toxic things out on the back porch somewhere that they don't have to be constantly in your environment, because there's a lot of illness that comes from things that are in the environment that are sitting there emanating toxic poison into your system, and eventually you get to the overload. Your body has taken all that it's going to take, and it breaks down, and you start calling it something else. You call it a virus, or you call it something else, when it is not something else. It is something that is identifiable. You could go right there and put your finger on it. If there's a skull and crossbones on the back of something you got under your kitchen sink, then it ought not to be in your environment.
That's a good point. Let's talk about ventilation.
Yes. Air.
Most of us now, many of us now, are living in buildings where it's very difficult to open the windows, or you just can't open the windows.
Or there aren't any.
Or you're dealing with incoming ventilation. One of the things I would urge is for people to have plants in their houses for the purposes of cleaning air, because you don't know how often they've cleaned the vents. You don't know if there's dust in there. You don't know if you have germs that are being bought from one family who's maybe they have pneumonia and or some type of respiratory illness.
Or you walking into the house with shoes on.
Right.
And you're tracking in everything that was on the street into your house.
That's right.
And that's
right.
coming into your lungs. And
the point is that I think that we have to look at developing systems that help keep us healthy. And I say systems, I don't mean just one or two things, but I mean the totality. We do need to exercise. We do need to work out. If it's no more than just walking. To me, there are about 5 or 6 things that we can really, that's easy for us to do. We can walk. Chicago, we're fortunate to have one of the greatest treasures in the world, and that's the Great Lakes, even though people pollute it. But to be able to walk the lakefront, to walk these parks, swimming, okay, because that's cardio, that's muscles, that's the whole 9 yards. Dance. I always talk about yoga, because I think yoga, particularly for older people, makes your body stronger and limber, because we need to be limber. We don't need to carry all the tension. I think that we need to have a medical home before you need one, meaning that this is a place that you get your primary services from, and you find a physician, and you should question that person on their philosophy of medicine, their philosophy of being a doctor, so that you can be clear that this is somebody you want to do business with. And if it's not, then you keep working until you find somebody
Well, we
else.
have 3 minutes, and I want to mention that I put a lot of trust in so-called alternative.
Yes.
Because alternative doctors were the traditional doctors.
Okay,
You
no
know,
problem.
there are people. I have one in particular that I can call on the phone, and he will tell me what to do. There's no charge for him to tell me what to do, and most of the time he will tell me to go to somewhere to get an herb, and it will address exactly what it is that I'm dealing with. So first of all, we start out identifying people who, like yourself, have done some research and can give us some suggestions about what we can do to help ourselves. And if we need further assistance, for me, MDs are my last resort.
I got you. But I'm just saying, what I'm saying is I don't disagree with that, because I think the trend is more and more and more complementary alternative medicine because it's so personable. But I think you have to have a totality.
You have to have.
You need to.
If you break a leg, you have to go to somebody who is an orthopedic person.
So what I'm saying is you put your system in place. You have a medical home. You have an MD. You have an alternative practitioner. You may have a chiropractor. It's all relative to.
You have a napropath.
That's right.
A naturopath.
That's right.
You have an herb doctor. You have people who know what it is that they do.
Right. And I'm saying it's based on what your state of being is and what you require based on age, based on gender, based on occupation, based on how you live and what you do.
And based on accessibility.
Absolutely. So I think we have to talk about systems. And
well, we can't do it because we only have 1 minute.
Well, that's what I'm saying. We just need to develop systems that take care of ourselves and our families and our communities if we're really serious about having health and minimizing duress and distress in these communities, okay? Because the consequence of this in the long term is going to be very dangerous if we don't put a stop to it at some point.
And we need health education.
Absolutely.
So we need that in the curriculum.
No doubt about it.
Of schools and churches and businesses.
No doubt about it. And one other thing, we need to encourage kids to get into allied health programs. There's no reason why black kids should not be over at Malcolm X. Okay, getting into the allied health. You know, we used to have Wallace Sadiq. He's an ancestor now.
Yes, I do.
Council of Biomedical Careers. That's one of the first reasons why I got into health. Okay, was through Wallace Sadiq, at that time who was Lou House. And remember the place he had on 47th Street over Walgreens.
Right.
And so what I'm saying is we need to